The first drops of rain hit my face before I even saw them. 5 figures huddled at the edge of the clearing, their clothes plastered to their bodies, their eyes darting toward the shadows. My instinct told me to turn away, to retreat into the cabin I'd spent months fortifying against the world. But the youngest, barely more than a girl, stumbled forward and collapsed in the mud. Her breath came in sharp, shallow gasps, each one shaking her tiny frame. The second woman dropped beside her, pressing a hand to the girl's forehead. Fever, I thought. The girl's skin was burning, her small body trembling. Shelter, they needed shelter, and I had none to give. My cabin had 1 bed, 1 room, and enough supplies for exactly 1 person. And secrets. Secrets I couldn't let them discover. Thunder rolled over the mountains, rattling the thin wooden walls of my refuge. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. 1 night, I told myself. 1 night and then they'd leave. The women moved past me with ease like they belonged, though nothing about them screamed ordinary. The blonde scanning my shelves with sharp, calculating eyes. Another carefully inspecting my rifle mounted above the hearth. One held the youngest close, murmuring words I didn't understand. I kept my distance, forcing myself to treat their names as irrelevant. Cora, Ivy, Ruby, Della, Bonnie. Names were dangerous. They invited attachment, and attachment invited risk. I directed them toward basic tasks. Water in the bucket. I'll make a fire. As I knelt by the hearth, I noticed the bruises, the scars, the evidence of violence, of ownership. Ruby's wrist bore the mark of a rope burn. Della's jaw still showed the fading purple of a recent blow. These women hadn't just run, they'd survived. They were fighters, and for a brief moment I felt the old weight pressing down on me. The men I thought I'd left behind, the scars I carried, the violence I'd vowed to abandon. But the storm outside roared louder than my hesitation, and when movement flickered at the edge of the tree line, I knew the past wasn't done with me. The wind tore through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and smoke from somewhere far off. Though I couldn't place its source, I heard her gasp again, Bonnie, the youngest, curling into herself as fever and exhaustion battled for control. I knelt beside her, pressing a damp cloth to her forehead, wishing I had more than a single bed and a few blankets. But the women weren't helpless. Ruby's eyes scanned the clearing with sharp precision as if memorizing every shadow. Della's hand hovered near her small knife, fingers flexing instinctively. And Ivy, she was already at the window, peering out through the rain-streaked glass with the quiet, practiced vigilance of someone who had spent years watching for danger. "They're out there," she said, voice low, almost a whisper. My stomach tightened. Not strangers, not random bandits. They had trackers. Men who didn't forgive. Men who never forgot. I moved toward the hearth, trying to keep my hands steady as thunder shook the cabin. My rifle sat mounted above the fire. My shotgun lay beneath the bed. 1 man could be dangerous. 6, 7. That was a death sentence in the open clearing around my cabin. I didn't speak, just watched them, noting every twitch, every instinctive movement, the way these women knew how to survive. They weren't asking for mercy. They were asking for sanctuary, and maybe if I was lucky, they were offering me a chance to make things right. I looked at the storm outside, the dark silhouettes of the tree line bending under the wind. My cabin, my life of solitude, had always been built to avoid this. The chaos, the violence, the way the past finds you no matter how far you run. But now, faced with their fear and determination, I realized that the storm wasn't just outside. It was inside me, and it had been waiting for a reason. The first shots rang out before I even fully processed what I saw. Figures emerged from the edge of the tree line, riding hard, guns glinting in the storm-darkened clearing. Horses screamed and skidded on the slick mud as their riders urged them forward. My heart pounded, not with fear but with the calculation that had kept me alive these years. 1 wrong move and everything inside my cabin would burn, including the 5 lives I had vowed to protect, if only for 1 night. I gestured silently to the women. Ruby, quick as lightning, dove behind the overturned water barrel, scanning the attackers with narrowed eyes. Della gripped her knife, fingers white on the handle, muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. Ivy took the pistol from the drawer, her stance steady, her gaze never leaving the advancing riders. Cora, calm but tense, moved to the rifle, checking the chamber with a precision that made me nod in silent approval. I moved to the window, shotgun in hand, and counted. 6 riders, maybe more, hidden by the storm. The rain plastered my coat to my back, but it would also mask my movements. My cabin had only one door, two windows, and no back exit. Any frontal defense would be suicide. We needed a plan, and fast. Thunder rolled overhead, shaking the wooden walls, masking the first shots fired from the cabin. A rider toppled, screaming as the bullet found its mark. The others hesitated, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. The storm was our ally now, but only if we stayed disciplined. I thought about the men I'd left behind in my past life, the ones I thought were gone, the ones who had taught me that mercy in the West was a luxury. Out here it was survival, strategy, and the sharp edge of instinct, and I realized for the first time in years that I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The storm outside was a violent drumbeat, masking the rapid crack of rifles and the pounding of hooves in the mud. Ruby's aim was precise, each shot taking down a horse or throwing a rider off balance. Della moved like a shadow, slipping between overturned barrels and furniture, her knife flashing as she incapacitated the nearest attackers who dared breach the cabin door. Bonnie, still weak from fever, clung to Ivy's side, but even she had learned to steady herself, breathing deeply as Ivy whispered instructions that barely rose above the storm. I crouched by the window, shotgun ready, calculating every distance, every angle. The men outside weren't ordinary outlaws. They were organized, ruthless, and relentless. Their leader, though I hadn't seen him yet, exuded an air I knew all too well. The kind of man who saw people as property, not human beings. My muscles tensed. I had hoped never to hear his voice again, but I had learned the West had a way of dragging the past out from hiding, especially for men like me. Through the rain, I caught a glimpse of one of the riders regrouping. Ivy's first shot rang out. The man toppled into the mud. A second shot cracked across the clearing and the torch he carried sparked and went out. Darkness reclaimed that side of the clearing, giving us precious seconds. I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. These women weren't just survivors. They were warriors in their own right. Each of their movements carried purpose, coordination, and a calm determination that belied their age and circumstance. My life of solitude had taught me to depend on no one, to trust no one. But here they were, trusting each other and slowly, trusting me. I glanced at the youngest, Bonnie, and saw not the terrified girl who had collapsed hours ago, but a spark of resilience in her eyes. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted, but the storm, the chaos, and the courage of these women had shifted the odds. We were no longer just defending a cabin. We were standing for every life that had ever been taken from them, every moment of fear and control they had endured, and every inch of freedom they had clawed back with sheer will. Through the pounding rain, I finally saw him, a tall man, riding with the authority of someone used to having the world bow to his will. His coat was soaked, his hat low, but I recognized the glint in his eyes before I heard the familiar, grating voice. Marcus Dayne. Thought dead 8 years ago, a ghost I'd hoped had vanished along with the old ranch. Yet here he was, alive, breathing fury and revenge into the storm. He dismounted, boots sinking into the mud, pistol gleaming, torch forgotten at his side. My jaw tightened, scar burning beneath my collar. I'd spent nearly a decade hiding, carving a life of solitude, convincing myself I could escape the shadows of my past. But Dayne didn't forgive. Dayne didn't forget. And now, he had 5 women who had survived horrors I could barely comprehend, right in his path. The women stiffened, instinctively forming a barrier between themselves and the man I had once thought dead. Ruby's eyes calculated trajectories. Della's fingers tightened on her knife. Ivy's pistol was poised, and Cora had her rifle ready. Bonnie stayed low, fever long gone but still fragile. I felt a surge of protectiveness that mingled with an adrenaline I hadn't known in years. Dayne's laugh cut through the storm, sharp and cruel. He didn't approach cautiously. He didn't negotiate. He demanded control the way a predator demands surrender. "You think hiding here will save you?" He shouted, voice rolling like distant thunder. "You think the past doesn't catch up?" I checked my shotgun. Both barrels loaded. Pistol ready, knife sharp. But this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the women who had endured, suffered, and survived. They weren't property. They weren't victims. And if Dayne wanted to take them, he'd have to go through every last one of us. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. Not just running from the past, but standing up to it. The storm became our cover, but it also amplified every sound. The snapping of branches, the pounding of hooves, the metallic click of pistols. Dayne's men spread out, circling the clearing, forcing us to divide our attention. I stayed low at the window, shotgun ready, but my mind ran faster than my finger ever could squeeze a trigger. One wrong move and the women I had barely come to trust would be torn apart in seconds. Ruby moved like a shadow, darting from cover to cover, picking off riders with uncanny precision. Each shot she fired took down a horse or sent a man sprawling into the mud. Della was a whirlwind inside the cabin, striking with her knife at anyone foolish enough to breach the door. Ivy, pistol aimed steadily through a gap in the boards, covered our backs. Cora's rifle cracked like thunder, sending another man tumbling into the mud, horse and rider colliding with a wet, explosive thud. Bonnie stayed crouched behind them all, eyes wide but unwavering, as if simply being present lent strength to the group. Dayne's voice boomed over the chaos. "You think a few girls and a coward can hold me off? Step aside, Rhodes, and this ends." His arrogance burned hotter than the rain that soaked my clothes. I tightened my grip on the shotgun. Step aside? After everything? Not a chance. I realized then that our fight wasn't just survival, it was justice. It was reclaiming the lives that had been stolen, the years lost to fear and control. The women weren't just defending themselves, they were defending every freedom that had ever been denied to them. I took a deep breath and moved to the back of the cabin, ready to flank the attackers. Each heartbeat hammered against my ribs like a drum. They were organized, but we were unpredictable. Every instinct I had honed over years of isolation screamed that we could turn the tide. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this storm wouldn't break us. Maybe tonight we'd finally fight back. I waited for the next flash of movement, then bolted from the cabin, shotgun in hand, rain soaking me to the bone. My boots sank into the mud, but the downpour masked my movements, turning each step into a calculated risk. The men shifted toward me, assuming I was reckless. Predictable. But I had learned long ago how to use the storm, the terrain, and their overconfidence against them. Ruby's voice cracked orders through the chaos, though barely audible over the thunder. She had positioned herself near the well, dynamite sticks hidden inside, calculating trajectories I wouldn't have believed possible for someone her age. Della slipped past the door's edge, knife ready to strike, while Ivy's pistol barked precise shots through gaps in the boards, keeping their attention divided. Cora's rifle maintained suppressive fire, forcing the attackers to move cautiously, unsure where the next bullet would come from. The first rider lunged toward me, gun raised. I fired once, sending him sprawling into the mud, then dove behind a fallen log as another shot tore through the air where I had been standing. Heart hammering, I could see Dayne himself dismounting near the cabin, torch in hand, pistol drawn. The bastard's eyes burned with the same cruelty I remembered from years ago. But now I wasn't alone. I hurled a stick of dynamite toward the clustered men near the well. Sparks hissed along the fuse as they scrambled in panic, colliding with each other and their panicked horses. The explosion shattered the night, mud flying, chaos consuming the clearing. And through it all, the 5 women moved with purpose, precision, and deadly calm. For the first time in years, I realized this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a reckoning. A chance to ensure that the past, the horrors, the losses, the men who believed they owned others, would end tonight. The storm raged, but inside me something else roared louder. The unyielding will to protect these women and see justice done, by whatever means necessary. The storm was deafening, but the sound of approaching boots and hooves cut through the rain like knives. Dayne moved with lethal precision, his eyes never leaving me, as if he could see straight into my chest and rip out every ounce of defiance I'd clung to all these years. I ducked behind a fallen tree, shotgun trembling in my hands, counting the seconds until the next moment of chaos. Ivy's pistol barked from the cabin window, taking down one of the advancing men, while Ruby's dynamite forced another group to scatter into the mud-soaked clearing. Dayla had vanished from my sight, but I could hear the sickening thud of her strikes. Knives meeting flesh and bone, precise and unrelenting. Cora's rifle split the air again, keeping another pair pinned behind a tree. Bonnie, small and fragile just hours ago, clung close to Ivy, but I could see the fire of determination in her eyes. She wasn't helpless anymore. Dayne laughed, a cruel, hollow sound that bounced off the storm clouds. "You think a cabin and 5 girls can stop me? Rhodes, give them to me and I'll leave you alive." The words hit me like a punch, but they only hardened my resolve. Step aside? Never, not now, not ever. I took a deep breath, heart hammering in sync with the storm. The clearing was a battlefield. Mud and rain soaked into every corner, but we had advantage where it counted. Unpredictability. I darted from cover to cover, luring a group of his men toward the barn where we had set more explosives. One misstep and they'd be trapped. One calculated move and the tide could shift in our favor. Every shot fired, every horse that screamed, every yell in the storm reinforced what I already knew. We weren't just defending ourselves. We were reclaiming the lives stolen from these women, taking the first step toward freedom they had fought for all their lives. Dayne was relentless, but so were we, and tonight we would show him that some fights could not be bought, bargained, or broken. They had underestimated us, and that would be their mistake. I could see the moment had come. Dayne's men were grouped too closely, their attention on the cabin where the women held the line. Ruby's eyes met mine briefly, a silent confirmation that the fuse was lit. Dynamite in hand, I sprinted through the mud toward the barn, every step measured, every heartbeat loud in my ears. Rain plastered my coat to my back, but the storm hid my movement. The explosion shattered the night. A fireball tore through the clustered men, tossing horses and riders into the mud, screams swallowed by thunder and the storm. Trees bent and splintered, smoke and debris filling the air. The shockwave knocked me off my feet, but I rolled, coming up behind another fallen tree, shotgun ready for the remaining threats. Inside the cabin, the women were unstoppable. Ivy's pistol continued to bark precise shots. Cora's rifle echoed in tandem. Della moved like a shadow, striking at anyone foolish enough to approach the door. Bonnie, finally free of fever, was helping Ruby reload, eyes blazing with a courage I hadn't expected from someone so young. Dayne emerged from the chaos, soaked and enraged, pistol raised, torch forgotten. His arrogance burned hotter than the rain that lashed his face. "You think this changes anything?" he screamed, advancing. But I wasn't afraid anymore. 8 years of hiding, 8 years of running from men like him had ended here. I raised my shotgun, my hand steady, my mind clear. This was the reckoning. Not just for me, but for the 5 women who had survived horrors beyond imagining. Tonight we would fight for their freedom and for mine. Every instinct honed in isolation, every lesson learned in the mountains led to this moment. And we were ready. Dayne stumbled from the wreckage, his eyes wide with disbelief and fury. He was soaked, battered, but still alive, still dangerous. I stepped forward, shotgun at the ready, but I knew brute force alone wouldn't win this. We were outnumbered, and the storm had slowed, leaving the clearing slick and treacherous. Every move had to count. The women emerged from the cabin, forming a line behind me, their weapons ready. Ruby's hands were steady. Dela's knife gleamed in the flickering light. Ivy's pistol aimed with deadly focus, and Cora's rifle held a silent promise of precision. Bonnie stayed close to Ivy, small but determined, a reminder of how far they'd all come. Dayne laughed, a sound void of humor, thick with menace. "You really think a few girls and a washed-up lawman can stop me? Rhodes, you've ruined everything. Step aside and watch them suffer, or fight and die with them." His words were venom, but they only sharpened my resolve. I moved forward, keeping my distance, watching his eyes for hesitation. He had none, but I had the advantage he didn't anticipate: the unpredictability of the storm, the terrain, and 5 women who refused to be prey any longer. Ruby lit another fuse, sending sparks toward the final group of riders, causing them to scatter. Della moved like lightning, her knife finding its mark on the nearest man who dared approach. And then it was just us, Dayne and me, face to face, memories of past scars burning hotter than the rain on our faces. He lunged, pistol raised, but I was ready. Shotgun roared, gunpowder igniting in the wet air, echoing across the mountains. He went down hard finally, the life drained from a man who had haunted too many lives for too long. The clearing went silent, save for the rain. The storm had broken, and with it Dayne's reign of terror. We had survived. The rain finally eased, leaving the air sharp and clean, carrying the scent of mud and smoke. I stepped out of the cabin, boots sinking into the soaked earth, and saw the 5 women standing together, weapons lowered but eyes still vigilant. They were bruised, battered, but alive and free. The storm had passed, but it had left something stronger in its wake, a sense of purpose, a bond forged in fire and survival. I walked toward them, each step measured, feeling the weight of the past 8 years lift slightly from my shoulders. Ruby adjusted the dynamite sticks we'd salvaged, already thinking ahead. while Della cleaned her knife with a calm efficiency that spoke of countless battles fought and won. Ivy checked the pistol and nodded at me, a silent signal of trust and readiness. Cora's rifle was slung over her shoulder, the barrel glinting in the weak morning light. Bonnie, finally smiling despite everything, carried blankets and food, small gestures that felt monumental after the chaos of the night. We surveyed the clearing together, a battlefield that had become a place of reclamation. The men who had hunted us lay defeated, and the cabin, our sanctuary, had endured. I realized then that solitude had never truly been peace. The real strength, the real survival, came from standing together, from refusing to be victims, from fighting for something bigger than ourselves. 6 months later, our cabin had transformed. Rooms had been added, a garden cultivated, and our supplies organized for the new families who sought refuge. Word had spread quietly, but intentionally through networks of those who needed safety, and our mountain refuge had become a sanctuary. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were building, protecting, and giving others a chance to reclaim their lives as we had reclaimed ours. And if you felt the weight of this story, the courage of those who fought when all seemed lost, hit the like button, share this tale with someone who loves the West, and subscribe for more stories where redemption, justice, and survival collide. Every day at 10 a.m., a new chapter awaits, so turn on notifications and step into a world where courage is tested and the West never forgets.